So for our video reaction we had to watch a video on why there's so much conflict at the workplace and what you can do to fix it. In this video, the speaker talks about how we usually think of conflict as something that happens between people. So when there's conflict at work, we try to blame people, or we tend to blame people who are involved and expect them to straighten things out. But people are just the part of the story that's easiest to see. The speaker talks about how there's so much more than just that. She explains how there are underlying issues or conditions that can lock people into their unproductive conflict and can make it hard for people to get past it, because what a lot of people don't realize is when we are blaming other people and saying that it's their fault or they need to figure it out because the conflict is between them, even though we all work together, we cause the conflict by blaming other people. And to solve the conflict, we do have to do some digging, like look at all of the underneath problems, like there's structures and there's different problems that we have to deal with, and it's important for organizations to identify these underpinning or underlying conflicts so we can work through them and work through them effectively. The author also, or the speaker also talks about like how there's steps to like helping with communication within the workplace and help solving the problems. So one of the steps is to rule out one individual source of conflict to kind of screen it out. So when we just like look at one person and say, okay, you did this, now you need to solve the conflict, nothing's going to be solved. You need to screen out like the people that have absolutely nothing to do with it. Like she explains how sometimes when dealing with conflict, people go to the upper level people and ask them questions, but it's important to stay with the people who are at the entry level, who are dealing with these conflicts and involved with these conflicts on a day-to-day basis and who witness what is happening. So screen out the people who it has absolutely nothing to do with and rule out that only one individual is the source of conflict. The next step that the speaker talks about is to ask the right people the right questions, which I feel like can be kind of hard to figure out, like who does it actually have to deal with. Like it takes some thinking, but it's important to interview and to get like a full range of opinions, because every opinion, like even though they don't try to, every opinion is going to be different because everybody sees it like in their own eyes. Everybody sees things differently. She gave an example in the beginning about how she was brought in to help two people figure out a conflict, and how she interviewed both of them and how their interviews were totally different. They totally saw two different things like as a problem, and it led to a lot of it wasn't the main level thing. Like she had to do digging and she had to see that there was underneath structures and more people that it dealt with than just them. So it is important to interview people individually and to get their idea of what's wrong, and then once you interview enough people who are dealing with the conflict, you'll be able to put pieces together to help figure out what is actually happening in the conflict and what you can do to fix it and what the steps are to having the good and better communication. And step 4, she talks about finding allies in all levels of the organization. And I feel like this is important because when you find allies in all the levels of the organization, you'll be able to see all of the different parts and all of the different opinions and views on it. Because somebody, let's say you're working in a restaurant and you're trying to figure out the conflict, the assistant manager may see the conflict differently than a server or the host or the cook, or even the general manager may see it differently than the assistant manager. So it is important to have all allies in all the levels of the organization and to see all the views of what they have. And then in the last step, the speaker talks about teaching new habits. And this is important because you can't figure out a conflict and just figure it out and move on. You should teach the people involved with the conflict how to have better communication and how to work past it, so next time this problem won't become so big, or it can be figured out earlier. And I think that is extremely important. And then some of the ways that she said that we can, or that to help with the communication problems were, the first one was lizard listening. And she said this is important to think about what will happen with the counterpart filters the conversation through their lizard brains, what misconceptions have come up, what is inaccurate, what are the negative beliefs, what could be misconstructed, even if it was with good intentions. So it is important to listen like that. And then her other one was the evil logic check. When somebody bothers us, we tend to think of them as a bad person, or so when we complain about that bad person, we specifically think that their counterpart is evil. And even though it is a strong word, she says it can lead to misconceptions and alternative explanations and different views about things. So overall, I thought this video was good and I learned a lot from it.